Today, we're going to look at a report from Brightfield Group looking at 2020 in review, some cannabis innovations report. So in the report, we're going to look at high-level cannabis trends and then dive into the data, explore some products that have won top shelf this year. Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. So after a difficult 2019, cannabis brands started 2020 with minimally available capital, and the pandemic didn't help with that issue. Strapped for funding, brands had to be strategic with the products they brought to market, and they couldn't afford a flop. So despite this, we still saw 912 new product launches this year. And in the innovations, we're going to highlight some of that in this report. New launches became customer favorites. Some products gained widespread success on shelves, and then innovations this year reflect a maturing market, interest in cannabinoids beyond THC and CBD, and of course, ever-changing consumer behavior. All right, up first is cannabis market maturity. Looking at seasonality, as cannabis matures, there's going to be more room for seasonal options, and consumers are going to have to expect their dispensary shelves to change with the seasons. Cannabis marketers should pay attention to seasonal product trends and in other industries and consider just how these trends could be adapted to the cannabis marketplace. So flavors with strong associations with specific seasons can already see in the U.S. cannabis market. For example, in 2020, during the winter, you had mint-flavored cannabis products that grew in share on the shelf. However, mint then lost distribution in April as fruity flavors increased in distribution, but product type matters. So edibles have a close analog in many traditional consumer product good industries and may be easily adapted to fix existing seasonal trends such as pumpkin spice edibles, playing into a wider autumn pumpkin spice craze. We definitely see a lot more hot cocoa selling during the wintertime, not so much lemonade or any of those other drinks. And coffee still isn't kind of a mainstream staple, unfortunately. You got to get cheaper on, the glass bottles or whatever else. And unfortunately, it's not a grab and go thing yet. So Brightfield Group has reported on innovations in cannabidiol or CBN, cannabidiol or CBG. Both are part of a growing trend in differentiation. There's literally hundreds of other cannabinoids. So a wide range of THC dominant products containing CBN are available at cannabis dispensaries throughout the U.S. CBN is widely promoting as a sleep-inducing cannabinoid. And in fact, any old cannabis you have will probably convert into a little bit of CBN as you have either light or oxygen degradation. It'll kind of just naturally turn into a nice little sleep aid for you. So looking at cannabis and stress relief, you have cannabis brands responding to the pandemic with more products positioned for relaxation and stress relief available on shelves. So in November 2020, Brightfield reported on cannabis consumers, revealing that 81% of cannabis helps with them deal with the stress of the pandemic, which is reflected in the growth of the products positioned for relaxation and stress relief. Together, those two positions increase in share by shelf by 10% this year, while other positionings like beauty and personal care and intimacy decline. Take a look at some of the product types that gained the most market share on shelves in the first 3 quarters of 2020 as markets come online or continue to mature. The cannabis product types available on dispensaries menus will adapt to consumer demand. So the selection at dispensaries offers can limit customers if it doesn't provide enough variety, or it can empower customers with an array of options. Through some, arguably too many options may confuse some shoppers. The point is that the type of edible on the menu doesn't leave room for exploration or insight into what the consumer really wants. So getting into the gauge of the product type and the attributes consumers desire will provide for a successful product mix that's both in tune with consumer demand. By looking at the big picture, customer data over the entire U.S. cannabis landscape, we can discern that products are maintaining their place on shelves. So this provides a fuller picture than simple point of sale data because emerging markets are messy. Lack of choice leads to consumers to purchase what's available and not always what's truly desired. So here's a list of the top 5 things of products that increased on store shelves the most throughout the year. Number 1 was candy. Number 2 were cartridges or pods. 3 is resin or rosin. 4, disposable pens, and 5, baked goods. That looks like a heavy dose in both edibles and concentrates, as well as discreetness. So it looks like people are kind of wanting a heavy dose for edibles and then something they can carry around that's convenient and discreet. So the top 10 cannabis products on the shelf year to date, see some brands like Chiba Chew and Smokies Edibles, Kiva Confections, and Wild. all of the brands you see, at least the 4 legal markets, including California and excluding Wild, they have products in Oklahoma's expansive medical cannabis market. Top 5 candy flavors, you got raspberry, watermelon, strawberry, fruity, and chocolate. And since January 2020, cannabis candies captured 12% of share, only third to vape cartridges, pods, and bud. So in August, candy helped with the highest share on the shelf for the year with 14% market share. From January to September, candy increased its total distribution by 4% at a growth of 41%. And the top 3 reasons for that is natural, relaxation, focused, and creativity. So cartridges and pods, they kind of had a shaky start to the new year. They just finished out their vape crisis and then hit right into the pandemic, which wasn't too keen on smoking or vaping. So they were kind of struggling a little bit. Looks like they had 22% year-to-date share on the shelf. Still not bad, at least 1/5. The vape crisis was attributed to the illicit vapes containing toxic cutting agents. Overall, cartridges and pod shares shelves grew by 3%, surpassing Bud on the shelf in March of 2020 and holding a lead ever since. Top 3 reasons for the positioning was the relaxation, stress, and then focus and creativity. Top trends were finding carts that were available in 500 milligram packages. That was about 74% of the sales. And then Roundup was the 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram packages with 18% year-to-date distribution. Rosin and resin provide some of the most potent doses of THC on the market, while cannabis flower contains 15 to 35% THC. Concentrates can be 60 to 90%. So there's a trend away from shatter, bud, wax, and crumble. Can tell us a few things. So as dabbing continues to be the predominant method of concentrate consumption, especially in the West Coast, you can experience dabbers will prefer specific concentrates over the general dab. So rosin and live resin gained wide appeal earlier this year because of the added emphasis on cleaner methods of dabbing. Baked goods, they saw a lot of sales early on the year when people staying at home, not really working. That way they could have something that was going to last all day rather than some topicals or even a tincture. People were going towards edibles quite a bit. Disposable pens, also discreet, going to sell a lot more than pre-rolls in places like Arizona. But not everyone wants to deal with the technical side of vaping or dabbing. So disposable pens provide ease and efficiency. And the not so winners, drinks. So there's a lot of anticipation around cannabis drinks this year, but the category was not able to shine on shelves. So though dispensaries in California market may have a cooler for drink options, menus across the country still have 1 or 2 drinks to offer consumers. Coffee still isn't one of them. Cannabis drinks have yet to offer their niche in the market. They aren't cost effective for heavy users, and occasional users enjoying a weekend buzz isn't enough to scale. So some brands try to mimic alcohol. The delayed onset for THC drinks will always be a barrier, even though there's some ways around that, like nano cannabinoids. But looking at Bud, what's the top distributed product type? Bud lost share on the shelf this year and now ranks second in share on the shelf. However, cannabis bud is still widely popular among consumers. 57% reported bud use in 2020. So the drop in distribution could indicate dispensary menus are carrying fewer strains of brands, while bud is being the first cannabis item to hit shelves as markets emerge. The decrease in distribution says more about the movement towards a healthier option mix rather than a lack of desire. Tinctures and topicals. So consumers are not too enthusiastic, but both lost distribution, both tinctures and topicals. They saw a decreased level in consumer use. So these product types aren't as ubiquitous as bud or vapes or candy, and yet have to crack the code in attracting cannabis users. Probably also has to do with staying at home and again switching to edibles. What's next for 2021? Cannabis innovation will only continue. So into the 2020 U.S. election, you saw Arizona, Montana, and New Jersey legalize cannabis adult use. Mississippi legalized medical, and South Dakota passed both medical and adult use. So of those, New Jersey and Arizona, they're going to see adult use sales late in 2021. New York and Rhode Island could also see sales later this year, both at the state legislature already talking about adult use legalization as of November of 2020. And then the cannabis West Coast maintaining a competitive edge over the East Coast and legalizing cannabis use to well-established markets. but the East Coast is much less established, with only Massachusetts only having adult use dispensaries for more than a year. Multi-state operators that sell medical cannabis on the East Coast, like Curaleaf, Cresco, likely help transition the East Coast markets for adult use, as they similarly have seen in Illinois. But East Coast legislation, this can provide a lot needed capital to U.S. cannabis markets. But with brands fiercely competing on the West Coast, likely to see the innovation on the West Coast rather than East Coast. Products that successfully compete in these markets may then establish themselves across the U.S. As long as they're deemed essential business, find somebody that has existing standard operating procedures on the West Coast, buy up some cheaper assets rather than going to the East Coast and starting up. It's going to be a lot more expensive than buying something on the West Coast that's pennies on the dollar in the form of distressed assets and then expand from there. But either way, from East to West Coast, looks like it's going to be legalized through and through. As soon as Mexico legalizes, it's going to put a lot more pressure on the U.S. And then at that point, you can decide where you want to, grow. If you're going to be vertically integrated, you can decide where to be at. It's a lot better option. That way you can manufacture all your CBD in Puerto Rico, take advantage of Act 20. You might want to grow in an area like California and then expand your multi-state operator or, your regular retail chain at that point and look at franchising instead of just royalties. So a lot could come up in 2021. You're just going to have to check back with the Talking Hedge and find out. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.